industry. So like follow up to that, Stephen, you have been in the tech industry at Le Yo and also Sohu. So I'd like to ask, how does a Chinese tech company compare on a global scale, on a global level?
I think this is a great question. If you kind of go back to 5, 7, 8 years ago, when people sort of look at the tech companies in China, they always think of Chinese tech companies as the ultimate copycat. Meaning to say, they look at what's the latest and the best out there, Silicon Valley, Israel, whatever. They then morph into a clone. And all of those clones has actually become global giants, being even better than the original players. What's my personal observation in any of the tech space, even in the traditional space, or even traditional plus tech like the O2O or whatnot, is that it's gone through an extremely exponential evolution, where it's not just enough to copy. You have to copy, innovate, change, and always try to outdo yourself and your competitors. Otherwise, there's no way you'll survive. So what this means is that as a finance guy, as CFO, when I do fundraising, whereas in the past it's enough to talk about the market, it's enough to talk about growth, now it is starting to morph into more and more accountability, in the sense that you not just have to grow, you have to prove that you can be profitable, you have to prove that you can outrun the local competitors, and then you have to also show you have the potential to internationalize. I think none of this is more obvious than in my current industry now in FinTech. So as an example, when I joined Le Yo in 2011, my mandate was to do fundraising and then potentially an IPO. So what they didn't tell me was you have to do both at the same time. So that's what I did. And I did that for a couple of years, and it was very intense. It's a little bit like running a marathon, except you're kind of sprinting, running a marathon in a sprinting speed. And you have to sort of adapt, and you don't know where you're running. So maybe that's one way to analogize the experience. But that has kind of evolved today in terms of, we run the marathon, we have to last the distance, you have to innovate and change, you have to look at the market, you have to look at the regulators, and then you have to look at international opportunities, you have to look at foreign entrants into the market, and then you have to look at how to raise fund and how to IPO. So it's maybe a very complicated way of answering the question, but what I would say is that you almost have to be highly flexible and yet focus on your strength. So for me, that's my experience, and the balance is very difficult because it's such a fast-paced and dynamic environment. You also have to kind of take a step back, find the time to really think and strategize. So the companies who find the right combinations to do that, I think ultimately will be successful. So maybe one last example, in the hottest FinTech companies, 3, 4, 5 years ago, there are 5,000 P2Ps. Today, there's probably 1,000 surviving ones. By the end, we get to the P2P game, there's probably about 1 to 200 that will ultimately survive. Out of this 1 to 200, probably will be 10 to 20 that will be the first tier. So how do you get from 5,000 to 20? You have to do what I just said, innovate, dynamic, have the time to think, have the time to strategize, make sure you know what, the regulators are thinking, communicate and drink coffee with them all the time. And also make sure you're doing the right thing and do good governance, do accountability. And Yong said it very well. Make sure you don't take risks. Otherwise, I'm the CFO of a FinTech. If you don't see me posting on WeChat, then maybe I'm somewhere.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of FinTech, so at the recent National Day rally in Singapore, PM Lee even said that Singapore should try and emulate the e-payment system in China. So, and also in Singapore, we have this new system called Pay Now, which is a partnership between 7 major banks. So, Stephen, while you're at the mic, how does a partnership like this between 7 major banks differentiate with a company like, let's say, Alipay, where it's an independent firm? Is there any difference in these two partnerships? I mean, these two organizations being in charge of e-payments?
I guess specifically the question in terms of the partnership, maybe the way I like to think about this is to bring it a higher level in terms of how e-payment and on a larger scale how fintech is going to evolve for a place like Singapore. I mean, on a personal level, if you talk about partnership within 7 banks, that should have happened years ago, right? I have a DBS card. For the life of me, I can never understand why I can't go to any ATM to withdraw money. I have to look for a DBS ATM. Having been in China for the last 10 years, I think I only go out with my phone. Like so many of you out here who realize that this is like advanced e-payment society, and maybe this is how it should be. So I think for Singapore to get to that, it has to play to its strength. And the strength, unfortunately, is not the size of the market. It's not the ecosystem. Because of the lack of a size and thereby a lack of an ecosystem, that will never accelerate to a pace like China. So it has to play to a strength. I think Singapore has a strength of being innovative, more top-down innovation. So I think the government should just say, you stop using cards. Everybody use e-pay. I think that would be the way to go. Maybe it's a very controversial way of doing it, but it has to play to its strength. I mean, take Indonesia as an example. When we look at Indonesia 5 years ago, everybody will agree that Indonesia is behind Singapore in terms of technology adoption, technology innovation. But look at Indonesia today. Ecosystem is building up, all the e-commerce. Traveloka, one of the biggest e-commerce, one of the biggest OTA has just raised funding as a unicorn. And then you look at FinTech going into Indonesia. A lot of Chinese FinTechs are actually internationalizing Indonesia. I will guarantee that Indonesia, within the next 3 to 5 years, will mirror China 3 to 5 years ago, becoming a huge e-commerce, e-payment, high-tech market because of market size, because of ecosystem. Singapore, without that, has to innovate differently, have to use its strength, has to be adaptive. So maybe as an example, to do some self-advertisement, Pintec, actually yesterday we announced investment into a Singapore JV, ironically called Pivot. So we are pivoting Singapore, using Singapore's strength to pivot into Southeast Asia market, using what we do best in terms of technology, adaptation, using what we use here in China and going into, say as an example, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia with our wealth management. So I think maybe that's a long answer to your question, but in my view, for the e-payments, they just have to do it differently. Linking up 7 banks isn't enough. That's what UnionPay has done, I don't know, 10, 15, however many years ago. We're so used to it. But today, we're not talking about UnionPay as an innovation in China. We're talking about Alipay. We're talking about WeChat Pay. When I went back to Singapore for the October holidays, I was very surprised. I can pay Alibaba. I can use Alipay to pay for my cab. I get 15% discount when I shop at Takashimaya using Alipay and stuff like that. I was surprised. I say, wow, this is so friendly. I'm finally happy to be back. I don't miss my wallet anymore. But it has to accelerate because by the time Singapore gets to cashless, China, Indonesia, India, Silicon Valley will be somewhere else. Yeah. So don't play the catch-up game. You have to sort of jump ahead of the game and think about what's coming next.
Okay. And like while we're in China, Chee, I'd like to understand, why do you think that e-payments has become so popular, especially for China?
Let me reorganize the questions, and because I think you are answering. Actually, I will answer the first question as well together. Actually, we look at Pay Now or Alipay or WePay or WeChat Pay. My view of this is important is the business model. Whether this business model works or not. In the Pay Now model, basically it's a collaboration between the banks. And then collaboration between the banks, what happened is that currently I know, because I just tried, registered a few days back for this, because I'm a tourist when I go back to Singapore. I do not know a lot of things. So because I know that we're going to talk about Pay Now. So I realized that this is a cooperation between a bank, and then there's currently no charges. You're not wrong. Currently no charges when I do transfer. But then the next question is, how are they going to make money? So who's going to pay for this service? So in other words, it becomes, what happens is you'll be cannibalizing the bank's business. The gyro, the ATMs, the POS, FTF POS, and things like that. So what is the incentive for the banks to promote this business? They will be very difficult for them to think about this, how to innovate, how to become more features. But on the other hand, in China, like for example, they say the e-payments that we talk about, Alipay, WeChat Pay, it's free of charge. Okay, and it's provided by non-banks, and they got a lot of incentive because how they make money? They got a lot of free floats. The floats are they get the floats, they can make money, a lot of money from the floats, and because they got the e-payment system, they can help to bring other businesses, games, consumption business, other and that. For example, Alipay, that is actually because of Taobao, then you got Alipay, and it helps to grow the Taobao business. So that becomes like the de facto. You need that. And in WeChat, my view is that currently why WeChat Pay is so successful is because they're killer apps. The Hong Bao is killer apps. If I'm not wrong, 2014, during the period, the Chinese New Year period, I think millions of people registered with the cards just to receive Hong Bao. I was also one of them. It was mad. People was sending Hong Bao. Then after I'm being the one of the boss in the company, they start asking me for Hong Bao. Then I can't send Hong Bao. Then how to? Then I have. No way. Then next thing they know, they don't work. They demoralize and things like that. But that's a killer apps, and then straight away the registration of the cards just shoot up. So I would say that unless one day, just now it says that today we just bring our handphone, we go out. Like me today, I just come out with my handphone. That's all. I just buy coffee using my.
Don't need your wallet.
Yeah, don't need a wallet. Yeah. Until that day in Singapore, then I guess that will be successful. But today is going to be difficult because, as I said, the business model. How are they going to? How the banks going to cooperate and then increase this volume, then cannibalizing their other business? That's a tough nut to crack. I'm hopeful about this, but feel that there's a lot of challenges.
I think it's more of like they have no choice, right? Because I've seen an article online that if e-payments become so popular, banks are going to lose their revenues by around 6 to 8%. So like you mentioned about them being cannibalizing their own business, but if they don't do it, someone else is going to do it, right?
Yeah, but it's going to be very difficult for 7 banks. You 7 banks, the 7 CEOs to approve the whatever process they're going to think of, the sharing of the costs, the infrastructure costs. Even going to put on features, you need to go through UATs in 7 banks. I tell you, that is going to be a tough one. And then, for example, for our Alibaba, the WeChat, whatever they want to do, just start it, and then they think of anything, they just try it, and then it's just up.
Okay, so the speed of getting things done. Okay.
Yeah.
So like while we're on the topic of fintech, I think I want to pivot this question back from an investor point of view for Richard and Teck Yong, from an early startup and also for a late stage investment fund. How would you assess a fintech company? Not to mention that Stephen and Chee are from a fintech company, but how would you assess a fintech company?
No, I think the assessing fintech company, there's actually no much different from assessing any other projects, especially for early stage. Primarily, it is like I say now, our focus is more to B, and the reason for that is really that to do a to-B kind of business or project, you need to have certain resources. You need a certain technology which the incumbents, the big guys and others would see a value of. So similarly for FinTech, for example. So what is the value that this project has got vis-a-vis the other project? What can they do that the other people cannot do? Of course, then that means the market size, etc. But I think that beside, yeah. Then as an early stage startup, then and this is the part where foreign startups, but we also have to think about is when we are also investing in local startups, how fast can they take to the market? Which is like, you know, the team, the completeness of the team, and how strong do they have a team member that are able to roll it out to the market, the business development side, the market development side. And this part is actually very important because the Chinese entrepreneurs, the startups are very competitive. So whatever, even like for the to-B business, whatever IP or technology edge that a startup or entrepreneurs has got, it will be like within 4 to 6 months, you'll see something similar in the market, or even better, as what my co-panelists have mentioned. So therefore, it's really that how whether you have somebody inside the team that are able to then roll it out very fast and able to do it. I think that primarily is very critical. And of course, is who else do you have? Then the team, whether they have a history of starting out a business, who else have they been working with, primarily, especially in the particular verticals. Like for some of those other projects that we work with, primarily in the advanced manufacturing or whatever, we tend to get good projects, or we tend to view it more favorably, those projects that are started by founders that have worked in the big guys before. I mean, like Siemens, come out from Siemens, Honeywell, GE. So therefore, they have worked many years there. They know the challenges, they know the technology behind it, and therefore they're able to roll it out. So similar for FinTech, if there's somebody that are coming out from the banks or from the financial system side, I think that we tend to look at it more favorably. We did invest in a couple of FinTech previously. One project which we actually liked very much then, it was started in 2014, was a project from Guangzhou, and at that time it was actually the one of the darling of the industry, whereby Lenovo Capital, everybody all jump in and stuff like that. But unfortunately, with the as what Yong had mentioned, the government then sort of like clamped down in terms of P2P, and it was actually a very blurred line. Then a lot of people then try to say, hey, differentiate themselves. But unfortunately, with that clamping down, that also means that the business will like, like the follow-on investors which they would line up, and the businesses, the financial firms, the security firms that were actually going to work with them sort of like held back their plans. And that sort of like forced them to in a way try to reposition and try to have a clearer differentiation from as a typical FinTech. So as investors, then we feel that, hey, when we look at all these projects, what are the regulatory challenges, primarily if they do have, or will they be facing if they are going into this industry? So FinTech is quite a challenge. And in that similar light, now that we are looking at blockchain, and again, blockchain has got is often misunderstood for Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and stuff like that. But blockchain is more than that. It's actually the technology platforms or infrastructure that goes with that goes below that. And Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is one of the application that comes of it. So unfortunately, it sort of like blew out of proportion, and there were a lot of bad press with that. So when we're talking about blockchain now, we actually work with the various technology platform players, bringing in a lot of developers to actually build on that front, and also looking at blockchain applications into specific industry. Smart building, smart technology, especially in the area of resource management, for example. So these are the projects which we think, hey, that this is something interesting. First of all, we have got people, or the founder of that project are focusing on that. They have spent a couple of years in this field, and they come from some of the technology players, and they immediately have some resources. And we could also bring in some resources to put 1 to 1 to 5 kind of a thing. So there's a quantum leap. So these are the projects that we will look at. Yeah. So fintech by itself, if it is going into some gray areas and stuff like that, that's a big question mark for us.
Okay, so you mentioned about like the core team's background, the company's partnership, and also any regulatory challenges. So before I get Stephen and Yong to rebut to that, I want to hear if Teck have anything to add on to what Richard just said.
Sure. I think in terms of the logic and the process is very consistent with what Richard mentioned, and I wouldn't repeat that. I think most of the time when we look at fintech and maybe on a broader perspective, internet companies, it's easy to get carried away by labels, right? By buzzwords. At least on a later stage perspective, usually what we typically tend to do is take a step back. What exactly is this company doing? How are they going to make money, right? It may not be visible today, but we need to be able to project forward, right? At some point of time, this business model has to become financially stable. It's got to derive revenue from somewhere and maybe profits at some point down the road. So it's an extension of whatever we see today. So it's going back to fundamentals, and then you put back in the tech, right? The internet perspective. How can tech and internet make the company do business cheaper, faster, bigger, right? That's essentially what tech allows a traditional business model to do. But then again, it might be solving a problem in an entirely different way, which is also an area that we need to be careful not to be blinkered and be constrained by traditional models. So I think first things first is going back to basics. How do you run a business? What problem is it solving? How is it going to make money? And then how is tech going to make it different? So it's still very consistent with what Richard is saying. And then that's how we look at it. And I think going back to one of my earlier perspectives as a renminbi fund on our side, even though we look at fintech, it's a lot more constrained than what a US VC fund in China would look at, largely because we are much more sensitive to the regulators and government policy. So while having said that, we have invested in a sort of fintech company. It's more, I would say, a credit tech risk assessment type lending platform. They take money from one of the big four banks and they lend out 小额贷款, which is small loans to consumers. So it's a 2C business operated on mobile phone. So as a user, you borrow money through the application on your mobile phone, and credit assessment is done with big data through the mobile phone, and your profile, whatever is available to the company in the government space. So that's what we have done. Not in a, I would say, in a huge quantity of companies in terms of what we have done in fintech, because we are much more conservative. And then going back to the earlier point, just to add a bit of color also from what I've seen, for China, I think Alipay and WeChat is something which is not government directed, obviously. It has developed organically. Alipay is largely a result of what Alibaba and Taobao has done on the SME sort of e-commerce side of the business, right? It started, you can think of it as Alibaba having collected a lot of data from the SME space. Since they're running an e-commerce platform, they know how each of the companies are performing in terms of sales and revenues, and it's so easy to run a SME finance business on top of that. Then on the other side, once you have a 2C e-commerce business, you have all the spending patterns of the consumers. And then if you add on the money market collection, sort of money market business on top of that, the whole thing runs by itself. So it's quite organic. And then WeChat, as we mentioned multiple times just now, Hongbao, it's a very social behavior. It's very, very cultural, specific to China. So some of these elements we need to consider. It's something which is not going to be easy for us to replicate in Singapore. But I think we're moving in the right direction. We've got to use policies to drive it, but at the same time, don't forget how some of these monsters, these huge companies were created. It was a bit of coincidence, I think, because of what they were specializing in the past. That allowed them to have that ingredient to create that e-payment sort of platform.
I think like of all the points mentioned,
And just to add on a quick point, before these two, Alipay and WeChat Pay started, if you go back in China and maybe other parts of the world, there's no e-payments, but there is some pseudo form of electronic cash conversion that was happening, online gaming, right? People were buying prepaid online cards from convenience stores, and using that to do online gaming, right? So that is the precursor of whatever you see on Alibaba and this Alipay and WeChat Pay.
and of all the points mentioned, I think one of the most important points would be like regulatory, the point about regulations, right? Because it's something that if it's said and done, like the fintech companies can't do anything about it, right? So how does, coming from a fintech perspective, how do you maneuver around this issue about the regulatory issues? Like for example, of the things mentioned, like background of the core team, the partnerships, all this.
Not talking about how to value a fintech company first of all, right? I think those that Young and Richard, whatever he says, I guess it applies. Yeah, there's the fundamentals still important. But for fintech companies, okay, again, I need to branch into two types of fintech companies. Again, if you're talking about the technology providers, that is the same as what any other how you value startups. But you talk about financial service providers, then I'll add more to the how you value or how you assess fintech service providers. As I said just now, this is a very high hurdle kind of business, because if at the end of the day, not just the regulatory part, because the regulatory part is just the end result. the important thing is you must be able to pay up. You know, if let's say our borrowers cannot pay up, you are supposed to underwrite. All those on the policy, on the regulatory papers, or on the law, the financial service providers are not supposed to underwrite. You're supposed to be the middleman. But if anything goes wrong, if the borrowers cannot pay up, then somehow you must cough out the money to help service the loan. So what it means that if you want to assess financial service providers, important thing is also the shareholders, the Kaosan. You know, who is the Kaosan? Are they having a deep pocket? Are they able to come in and help the platform if things goes wrong? So in our industry, the biggest platform is Lufax. Lufax is a Ping An 集团. Yeah, the mountain behind is a Ping An 集团. Like for me, Wang Xing, my mountain behind is the 先锋集团. So as I said just now, the P2P companies will become from 5,000, dwindle into now about 1,000. Those that are without strong backings, slowly they will just fall off. Okay, so I would say for that space, in order to assess financial service provider, you need to go one step up and assess the support of the shareholders, whether they are strong or not, or whether they're willing to support.
Okay.
And then about the regulatory part, in order to do well, or how to say this, as I say, okay, regulatories are usually lacking behind innovations, especially in terms of financial sectors. So, like for example, P2P business, when we started 3-4 years ago, you can't even find this Wang Dai or P2P in the China law. No such things. No. Yet the Chinese companies are moving into it. Basically, what we are doing is that we are thinking, because you can do lending. That means I can 民间借贷, I can lend you money, and then I sign a contract between you and me, so I can move this offline business online. That's why it become a P2P business. But from regulatory side, there's no such law. So there's always a lack of the regulatory side. Also, they always fall back behind in terms of pace. So how the industry works now is that not just me, not just Wang Xing alone, all the financial service providers, even the fintech companies, we are actually helping the regulators, teaching them how to regulate us. So there's this term called RegTech. Yeah. So you it's unlike previously when you go to assess a bank, supervise a bank, you go and see some of the loans that they do, they got all the paper trails and things like that. You can actually go and supervise that. Now you see big data, the amount of data in the system is tremendous. And just now we talk about those business that Pintec and they're talking about. We're talking about sub-second decision made by the computers or based on the big data to decide whether to lend money to an individual. This is called the payday loan. Currently that is very popular in China. In this kind of sectors, in this kind of segments, you can't just use the old way of regulating financial service providers. No way. And the regulators are having hard time. I actually, we understand where they're coming from, and so we are really helping them. We are actually helping them build the system to regulate us. We actually provide a lot of people to a lot of technology people, even standards, creating standards, because in terms of financial service providers and there's fintech industries, there's no common way of measuring each individual companies. The transaction is so different. So if they are so different, you can't put onto a baseline. How are you going to supervise? So that is the first step. So we are, for example, I'm the committee in the National FinTech Association in China. We are building standards. First of all, we have to build standards. What is a transaction? What is a borrower? What is investors? Before we can actually build a system to collect information, to monitor, to supervise the place. So this is where the industry is coming in. So unless we are helping the regulators become comfortable with us, comfortable in knowing where the risk these financial service providers are having, they can't open up this. And for currently the VCs and those who are investing in us, they have to wait before they can cash out. Yeah, unless one day unless the day that the regulator says that now, okay, you are licensed, these are licensed, these are not licensed, then the investor can cash out.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be discussed in the industry of fintech. I'm sorry, Stephen, I have to deprive you of your opportunity to speak to that because I want to pivot the discussion a bit. So today's topic is also about entrepreneurship, and amongst us, many of us are maybe like working class adults, but also wanting to start their own small businesses. And a lot of students you see here are all from Singapore. They're coming here to pursue an entrepreneurial venture next time. And even like some students here, they even have their own startups. Like Heng, are you here? Heng, show of hands. Yeah, so you're 24 this year? 23, yeah. He even has his own startup like last year and still ongoing. And like just a show of hands, who would try having their own company next time in the future? Just a show of hands. They have to be shy. Yeah, so we want to make the most of today's opportunity with all the panelists here. So like this question goes out to all four panelists. So in a short answer, can you give us 3 metrics that you would gauge a startup before you invest in one? The short answer, just 3 metrics. Maybe, who has the mic? Richard, you want to go first?
Viable business model. I mean, like how do they make money out of it in a sustainable long-term basis?
Cutting to the chase, what problem are you solving? Why you? And how? So that's how I look at it.
I would say, well, similarly, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And then more importantly is, are you resourceful? Can you adapt to changing situations and changing problems? Because when you're starting, obviously you have questions that haven't been answered, and as you apply it, the conditions could change. So the question is whether the team is dynamic.
I think most of that I would say covered. But I will add, I think the most important thing I was think the management team, whether they are adaptable, because the first business you start never be the success story at the end of the day. You will change somehow along the way. You have to adapt to the new environment, new policy, new needs.
And another question to open up: would you advise entrepreneurs to go for where the money is in the industry, which industry is profitable, or where your passion lies? You have to choose one.
Maybe I'll just
Profitability of industry or passion for industry.
I think it's not cut and dry. I think it's a combination. At the same time, I think you have to also be very sure that you are the right person to do it. Because, and I'll highly encourage, as an aside for the younger generations, you are in this course because of entrepreneurship. You're here in China because you want to see something different. Go back and make use of the opportunity. But, going back to the question, again going back to who you are, what you can do, combining that with a market. I mean, if who you are and what you can do is so specialized that there's no market, then obviously it doesn't work. If you go into a market that you obviously don't have a strength and cannot differentiate, and you won't be able to build out a barrier to entry, that's not going to work either. So it has to be a combination of both. That's in theory. Then you comes to the execution, where it comes to the day-to-day, the grinding, the loneliness, and then the commitment, and for those of you, probably not most of you, but for those of you with family, then how do you put food on the table and stuff like that? It's actually a very cruel profession to choose. Any successful entrepreneurs will only talk about what they're successful in. If you dig really deep, they've gone through multiple failures. So are you ready to go down that road? If you're ready, then maybe at the end of the rainbow, there's a pot of gold. And I highly encourage any of you to do it.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Yeah, this is a long haul, and you really have to think it through. Whether or not you have got what it takes, and even if you have passion, do you have what it takes to build a successful career out of it? And this part is really unnecessary, as well when like youngsters like you guys. The culture in Singapore and China, one part of it, or in that perspective, coming from Shanghai, I see the whole changes in terms of entrepreneurship culture in Shanghai over the last few years, vis-a-vis Beijing, for example. Shanghai, like Singapore and Hong Kong, has been a hub for multinationals. The parents in Shanghai having a one child, most of them will want the kids, especially if you are like graduate from Fudan, Tongji, and all this Jiaota. It's a very good career to join the multinational, the finance sectors, the banks. They have a whole life, like paved out. So historically, entrepreneurship in Shanghai lags behind that of Beijing, for that matter, and also among other reasons. But the younger generations, now that with Ma Yun being the icons and stuff like that, and being the one-child policy in China, in Shanghai, there's this thing about 体验生活. So the parents have reached a certain stage whereby they encourage the kids to go and 体验生活. So go and try out new business, try out to entrepreneurs and stuff like that. But in Singapore, I'm not sure whether this is still going to become a mainstream. So therefore, as a students or as a Singaporeans starting our ventures, how's the social level of acceptance for you to start a career in entrepreneurship, failing over and over again? You're not able to bring back the bacon, have to depend on your wife, for example. You might need to shelve your whole marriage life, having a kids, all these things. Are you ready for that? So you really have to think it through really hard.
So we definitely have a lot more to discuss, and I have a lot more things to ask. We can definitely take this offline. You all can mingle around. So I have one last question. Maybe we would like to hear from everyone. So when should a company decide to expand to China? And a follow-up to that is, what is the success rate of foreign firm in China?
Okay, I have the fortune, because of what we have built up over the last few years, a lot of the foreign government agencies are engaging us to help their startups coming into to China. And this is the part which I find it, I have to tell the, even though the government or the foreign government actually pay us good money, but we always tell, I always told the foreign startups, it is not easy. In China, it's very competitive. So do you have what it takes? In fact, the foreign startups have faced a greater challenge as opposed to local ones because about localizations, the time to market, etc. So typically for, let's say, like the Koreans startup, for example, we would only encourage them to come to China if they have reached A rounds and above. They have success, they have a proof of concept. They already have some existing track records. So likewise, I think that the same probably will apply to Singaporean startup as well. And if for the IPs that you have, that potentially will only give you a small time advantage for 4 to 6 months. So how do you then, within this 4 to 6 months, quickly go and garner as much market share as you can, and so on and so forth. So you really have to be very clear with that. Yeah. And the other thing, which I find it is something which often not, which is often omitted or not considered, is that once you start out a business, let's say in Singapore or elsewhere, to reach A rounds and above and all this, you means that you already have a ongoing business in your home country, but as a startup, how do you then expand into China? Because China, to be successful in China, you cannot have a wholly owned subsidiary or a branch. You need to have a full-time operation with a full-time team here, dedicating a lot of resources. So do you have the resources to do so? Are you willing to give up what you have achieved in a home country like Singapore, Korea, or elsewhere, and move and try to do the same in China? And I think that this part is really very important. It's just like a glass of water, right? If your glass of water is already 3/4 full, you need to empty them in order to fill it up again, rather than, you can only add in a bit to try to fill it up to the top, that kind of thing. So it's really sacrificing, or you already have a proof of concept back home, but sacrificing that to take another plunge into China. I think this is something which is very realistic.
Yeah, I think there's no standard answer when you should come to China. I think if from a startup perspective, I guess the question here is the business that you're in, is the problem you're solving a very local one, right? Some businesses are solving problems that are extremely local. So if you are thinking from that perspective, if I'm starting up in Singapore or Silicon Valley, even if I'm successful, it doesn't mean that I can transplant the business quickly to China enough, right? And the other question here also is how high is the barrier to entry for whatever you're creating? If the barrier to entry is high enough, then maybe it doesn't matter. You can come later, right? But if the barrier to entry is not high, it means that a business model that someone can understand in 5 minutes, probably 100 people can copy it very quickly. So then the question here is, how fast can you run when you move to a different country? I think crossing countries is a huge challenge. I was just hearing about Alibaba in the early days having an office in Silicon Valley and Hangzhou, and they realized that after a short period of time, it's very impossible to coordinate 2 teams in 2 different time zones. Maybe Singapore and China, same time zone, mostly similar ethnic Chinese culture might be less of a problem. But I think China is huge, right? If you are thinking of having a startup in China is still a very different proposition from doing a startup in Singapore. But again, I think there's no standard answer. I think it really depends on what type of business model you are thinking about. If it's FinTech, maybe it's Singapore. It could be possible because there are a lot of policies that are supportive right now, specifically for FinTech in Singapore. Yeah.
Stephen and Chee, you want to weigh in on that? But like when you think that a company should expand to China? If not, we will move on to the next phase. We'd like to open the questions to the floor. Sure. So, like I'm sure all of you have a lot of questions. Like me myself, I'm learning here. I'm writing down notes that I'm taking it from the panelists. So I like to open the questions to the floor. If anyone has any questions, just feel free to raise your hand. If you need any incentives, there'll be prizes for people who ask questions. So, if that. Yong asked whether those who answer the questions get any prizes or not. So, do we have any questions on the floor? If you're shy, it's okay. We can always take the questions offline, and then you all can ask the panelists like over lunch or while we are networking. Anyone has any questions here? Okay, sure. We can. Maybe we need to announce what's the price. Then maybe they'll figure. Then we see them raise their hands. But it's okay. So I really love to continue on the discussion today, but really due to time constraint, we can't move on as much because I have so much more that I want to ask and learn from everyone here. So as we end, I'd like to get everyone to give us a round of applause to the insights from all four. Yeah. And with that being said, is David around? David? David, we'd like to offer like a small token of appreciation for the four panelists. So David and his team and Evelyn, they're the team from NTU that made all this possible, which made me possible to come to do an internship in China. So we have some token of appreciation for the four panelists. So can I invite David, please? So I'm going to stand here. So for Chee Yong, can smile. Wait, there's a photo. Smile. Okay, thanks. And Richard. Stephen. And of course, Teck Yong. Okay, thanks a lot, David. So, in ending today's whole panel discussion, we have a lucky draw that is worth, as you know, 100,000 now, 10,000 RMB worth. So Billy's gonna help us initiate that. So, do y'all put your name cards?
Yeah, did you all write your name and put inside?
The panelists said they didn't include their name cards.
You are not included. You will be included in the lucky draw, as in the draw. But not so lucky. You'll do the draw. You'll do the draw. Okay, since there wasn't any questions just now, so the prizes or the T-shirt, okay, we will just put it into the lucky draw as well. So we'll just draw additional names. Okay. So we'll start off with the T-shirt first.
T-shirt first, okay.
No.
Oh yeah.
T-shirt.
Okay.
T-shirt. I do simple one.
Okay.
The big prizes we leave it to them. You read this? Who's this?
Chan Fong.
Chan Fong.
Chan Fong.
Chan Fong.
Where are you?
Left. Okay. Kathy.
Cathy. C-A-T-H-Y.
Yours.
Oh,
okay,
nice. Come down. Come on down.
Okay, I'm just going to give the T-shirt. You look like you can just take the smallest one, huh? You can exchange all the colors later, huh?
Okay, we have 3 more shirts, right?
Yep. I'll take 2, then you take 2. Max. Yeah. I think you look alright with this.
Okay. Two more. Chee, Yong, will you help me? Just two more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just take two at the same time.
Okay. So we have Zichen,
Is this sham? or
Zicen, Zichen, nice.
Is that a sham or a Sean? Can't really tell. SHAM or SHUAN?
Is that
Sean?
you?
Sorry.
Ah, Sean. Okay, nice.
Okay. So you should take this. You should take this because the size, not the color, size. Thank you. Okay.
And I think we have three, right? Three bigger prizes.
Yeah, we've got 3 big prizes. So we'll start off with the smaller one. This is a $500 voucher for Jumbo. Thanks to Jumbo Seafood.
Jumbo Seafood. Okay. Richard, could you help us, please?
RMB. Not dollar, RMB.
And the lucky one goes to Joanne. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So 听者有份. If you want to go Jumbo Seafood with her, better add the WeChat. Really?
And
So you have to bring all of us there this time.
next up, what do we have for grabs?
The next one will be for ladies. Or guys also can. I see the value first. This one is a $1,000 voucher for facial products and
Okay.
services.
Stephen, could you help us,
Okay,
please?
from MTM. From MTM.
We're hoping for a girl here. You want to help us?
I think the last time a guy got this.
I think this is Tracy.
Tracy? Tracy? No? Sure, no, seriously. Which one is Tracy? Is that?
This is Tracy, right?
Yeah. Tracy.
Left. Calling once, calling twice. No need to be shy. If you don't want, you can come down, take ready, and then pass it back to me. Don't be shy. Come. Yeah, you can sell it on. Yeah, make use of the e-platforms to sell that. What's the platform that you can sell anything on? Okay, and last one. This is worth 5,000. 2 nights of stay with Grand Millennium in their club room. Okay, so.
Yong. I hope my name is there.
Samantha.
Samantha?
Which Samantha? There's 2 Samanthas, right?
Huh?
Oh, you didn't put it in? Is there another Samantha? Oh, so you put this, right? No one wants a $5,000? Should we draw another one?
Calling once, calling twice. Again, please don't be shy. You know, any Samantha can jump out, take this, and give it back to me,
We're not going to check your name on your IC, So
Suddenly we have like 15 Samanthas running out. Okay. Well, we'll have to take another one then.
Florence.
Oh, okay. Wow. Finally, we have a winner. There you go. Okay, once again, thank you, Elston. Thank you to all the 4 panelists. Can we have another round of applause for them? And before everybody moves away, we would like to take a group photograph. So can everybody, I think is from our past experience, the best angle would be from here. So everybody stay where you are. I think we can take the videos away. 我们那边拍那个照，对吧？对。Okay, so if we can, yeah. If we can all just go onto the steps and find the.
Okay, Dion, I heard that this is your first time attending OSG talk. So what are your thoughts and opinion about it?
I think that this event is really very informative because we get to have local speakers who are really experts in their field of like fintech and also like entrepreneurship. So it's really good to be able to hear their thoughts and how they view the current landscape. So yeah, I think this event is a really good platform for people who really are interested in fintech and in startups to really come and know more about it.
That's great. It looks like you really learned a lot through this FinTech talk. Okay, next up, we have another interviewee coming up. Hi Max, I heard that this is your first time attending OSG talk. So how do you find today's FinTech talk?
I find that it's particularly meaningful for me because especially I'm working under Pintec and there are several competitors, many competitors in this fintech scene, and also there are a lot of different professionals in this financial scene that are in this talk. So like I gain a lot of knowledge outside of fintech itself from like the last speaker. He also talked about private equity, which exposed to different parts of the financial scene, which was very insightful. Yeah.
So would you consider to start your own business in China? Like maybe a fintech startup?
Currently, not really, because I'm working under a fintech company, Pintec. So I know that there's really a lot of competitors, and it's very difficult to differentiate yourself. And I feel like my company itself is good enough. So it's very difficult for me to start a company and compete with whatever that's here. Yeah.
I see. So how about building your own startup in Singapore?
I think that's viable, and that's actually a plan I have in a faraway future. But not for now, because I plan to be more professional in what I can do and will be able to do in the future, then start up when I'm really good at it.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi Yong, I understand that you are from a non-finance background. So does today's FinTech talk appeals to you?
Hi. So actually, I think that today's talk is actually really still very valuable because the speakers made it really easy and layman for like outsiders like us to understand about the whole fintech scene in Beijing and comparing it to Singapore. So actually gives us a very valuable big picture about the whole fintech in the world actually. So and like how Singapore is lacking in terms of the fintech scene and how we can actually help. So this is actually really valuable for me in my future entrepreneurship stints.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad that you learned a lot through today's talk. Thank you. Hi Garrett, I understand that this is your first time attending our OSG FinTech talk. So what do you find most enjoyable about today's talk?
I find that the whole experience is very empowering. Getting to know most of the entrepreneur or Singaporean that have been here for about many years. And what is the difficulties they're facing. As well, I gave a lot of insight on how to grow a particular sector business and how to fight against all the challenges. And of course, as being in China as a ever-growing big economy, the risks and the ever-changing landscape is ever there. It's much more bigger than Singapore itself. So whatever they have given us some insight, I think is good to be used for a lot of future Singaporean entrepreneurs to embark on. It is maybe in a smaller scales back in Singapore, and eventually if they like to venture into China itself, they could actually use all this insightful knowledge for their future challenges back in Singapore, back in China.
So which talking point interests you the most and why?
I would like to get to know more about the fintech arena, especially in right now in most of the we call it the money market industry, because I would like to find out like what is a particular sector that these angels and VC is particularly interested in, and what are the hot industry that we're going, so that on a certain business for myself, I will able to evolve and able to go around, or in fact able to immerse into some of the industry that's particularly hot, and share some of the resources and share some of the some of the interesting business market into this particular industry.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. See you again.